Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to continue talking about some of the 3.13 news that's come out, and I want to discuss the Deadeye Ascendancy, which is getting some pretty significant overhauls in 3.13. So this will be going live at the same time as the Echoes of the Atlas expansion and also the Ritual League, and that's in approximately 6 days from the time that I'm making this video. So, the Deadeye Ascendancy currently is a projectile specialist, and that identity is not changing. The Deadeye is designed as a way that if you're firing, if you're using bows or wands, the Deadeye provides incredible, unparalleled screen coverage for your attacks, and also provides considerable sources of damage. Now, the way that the Deadeye is shaping up at the moment, I think that the key difference between the current Deadeye and the new Deadeye, the current Deadeye has a number of significant sources of damage on it. The new Deadeye is going to be even better at damage projection than the current Deadeye, but loses a couple of its damage options. So what that's going to mean is that where it's common at the moment for Deadeyes to use a support gem like greater multiple projectiles or greater volley support, instead the new Deadeye builds that come for the Ritual League will probably be more likely to focus on covering all of that damage spread with the Ascendancy, than to just use pure damage support nodes instead, support gems instead. So let's go through everything. Firstly, Fast Shot. Fair warning, Fast Shot is one of those nodes that not every build wants to take. What it does at the moment is it causes the damage of your projectile attacks to ramp up over some distance. From memory, at the moment, it's 100% at point blank range to 130% at long range. This is changing. Fast Shot is now going to deal only 80% at point blank range of your base damage, but 160% at long range. The way that I like to think about this is that compared to the current version of Fast Shot, you are half a support gem worse off at close range and half a support gem better off at long range. Ultimately, this is a buff to Fast Shot, but only for the builds that want to use it. But then we have this second line, projectile barrages have no spread. The support gem barrage support is one that can be a tremendous damage multiplier for single target. However, it's only really good at point blank range because the shots that it fires out will end up they'll be spread out over a narrow cone in front of you. And if the monster that you're firing at is at long range, some of those will miss it. Unless that monster is really big, like say Kitava. But if you're firing on a human-sized monster, let's take as a good example of this the boss of the Haunted Mansion map, which is roughly human size. If you're firing at that from across the other side of the screen with a barrage, you will miss with most of your shots. With Fast Shot, you're going to hit with all of them unless the monster is actively moving at the time. So Fast Shot is going to be a tremendous damage multiplier for long-range hitting of bosses. This thing's best friend forever is going to be Decoy Totem. You are definitely going to want to combine Fast Shot with Decoy Totem. So drop Decoy Totem, then zoom to the other end of the arena and use Fast Shot to hit the monster, pepper it full of arrows from very long range. I'll also add that Divergent Decoy Totem, assuming that it dodges a nerf bat, is incredibly powerful. Next up we have Ricochet. Ricochet currently has skills chain +1 times and a little bit of damage. That's changing. It keeps the skills chain +1 times, which is the main reason you take it. But it's going to get this. Projectiles have a 30% chance to be able to chain when colliding with terrain. Now I don't know I don't know how good this is going to be. It's one we're just going to have to see in practice. My gut says that it's going to be pretty good, but that it's not going to be anything to write home about. Ultimately, Ricochet is such a powerful node that you would be taking it anyway. It's already outstanding and it's just changing a little bit, but it still does fundamentally the same things. Next up we have Endless Munitions, and this one is incredible now. So think of this as a lesser multiple projectiles that is always active and that does not have the opportunity cost of taking a support gem slot, nor does it have a less damage multiplier attached to it. It's all the upside of lesser multiple projectiles, none of the drawback. Essentially, once you have Endless Munitions and Ricochet together, you do not need any more sources of damage projection on your build. That means that you can then use five support gems at endgame that are all dedicated to dealing damage, Earlier in the league, you can use 3 support gems on a 4 link that are all dedicated to damage plus your skill, and let Ricochet and Endless Munitions ensure that your shots hit the entire screen. This is just an incredibly powerful node now. It was already good with only 1 additional projectile. It did do something else as well on top of that in the current version of the game, but the new version is just so much better. The other thing that's really good is that having 2 additional projectiles ensures that you are still hitting the spot that you're aiming at on screen. When you have an even number of projectiles, you'll fire slightly to the left and slightly to the right of where you're aiming. When you have an odd number of projectiles, i.e. your only additional source of arrows is Endless Munitions, you will hit where you're firing at. That's really important when targeting really small enemies. Next up we have Occupying Force. Now, if you've never played with Mirage Archer, it's a fun support gem. What it does is it causes a little green ghost, I like to affectionately think of them as Baby Yodas, to sit on your back and to copy the attacks that you make. So whatever attacks you're making with your bow, this little green ghost will make those same attacks at a slower attack speed and dealing less damage. It's actually a really good support gem. It was so ubiquitous that it got nerfed a few leagues ago because it was just the best support gem available for bow attacks in the game, but it's still pretty solid. So, what's changing with Occupying Force is that instead of these little Baby Yodas sitting as a backpack for you, you can put them down on the ground and you can have 3 of them. Occupying Force is going to be a really difficult mechanic to assess. And the reason for that is that there's ambiguity in the word near here. Cannot summon Mirage Archers while near your Mirage Archers. Near is a word that in Path of Exile has a lot of different meanings. It can mean within a radius of 20, which is pretty small on the screen, or it can mean a radius of 60, which is most of the width of from your character to the end of the screen. And really the strength of this is going to come down to what those hard numbers are. If the hard numbers work out well, then this is going to be a really strong, really strong effect. The key benefit to this is going to be against bosses that you want to be attacking from, like particularly in conjunction with Farshot. You want to have the boss in one spot of the arena chasing you whilst your Occupying Force archers are attacking it from all directions. So, what do I think on this? I want to try this out before I come out and say that this is actually fantastic, but I do think it will be really good. The other thing that's important with it is that move speed is already one of the best stats in Path of Exile. It's very powerful defensively, it's very powerful offensively, it's a loot collection multiplier. It also helps you get XP faster as well. Move speed is already really good, but with Occupying Force, it also reduces the ramp up time necessary for your damage. So going from, say, 10% move speed boots to 30% move speed boots is going to reduce the time that you're spending setting up your Occupying Force archers. So making an already good stat better, making your Quicksilver Flask into an effective damage flask, this is looking really good. But it all comes down to what this word near means. Because character move speed ramps up so much over your progression, I would suggest holding off on taking Occupying Force during the campaign. I would not take this in your normal or cruel lab, and the reason for that is that your character's move speed this is likely balanced around endgame move speed, and you're not going to be moving at endgame move speed yet. So pick up your Endless Munitions and Ricochet earlier, and hold off on Occupying Force for a while if you decide to take it. Next up we have Gathering Winds. Now Gathering Winds is being transformed a bit. This is the Tailwind mod at the moment, and the way that it works, you and nearby allies have Tailwind. This is a buff over the current way that Tailwind works. Gain 1 Gale Force when you use a skill, and Tailwind gets 15% increased effect on you per Gale Force. This also sounds really good. You are building up to higher numbers than you used to be able to. This seems at first to be a strict buff on the current version of Gathering Winds in the game. However, there is always a catch, and that catch is that Tailwind itself is being nerfed. Ultimately, I think the new version of Gathering Winds is about as strong as the current version overall. Maybe slightly worse than the current version, but that's fine because the current version is really good. You are losing out on the 1000 flat evasion rating that it gets, which is absurdly powerful during the campaign at the moment. 1000 flat evasion rating is basically enough that while you have Tailwind in the current version of the game, you pretty much can't get hit if you take that as your normal Labyrinth reward until about the point that you're at the Cruel Lab. So the current version of it does do a lot, but I think the new version is going to be fine anyway. Rupturing, I want to come back to in a sec. The reason for that is that it is such an oddball effect. It's the only bleed-related node on here, and most builds won't want it, but for the ones that you do want it, it's really good. Likewise, Focal Point I'll come back to. Wind Ward is an interesting one. Wind Ward is an extension on Gathering Winds, and it causes you to take 3% less damage per Gale Force that you have. So the more quickly that you are firing skills, the more well defended you are. However, you lose all Gale Force when hit. The only builds that I think Wind Ward will be really good on will be builds that stack a lot of evasion and that stack a lot of dodge chance and that use acrobatics and phase acrobatics. However, that's exactly where you are on the passive tree if you're considering playing a Deadeye. You are going to be a ranger, which means that you're going to be right near all of those good evasion nodes. So for that reason, I think there'll be some people who use Wind Ward. And you know, the fact that you're taking potentially as much as 30% less damage with the first hit that actually does get through all of your probabilistic defensive layers, like your spell dodge, your attack dodge, and the like, that's potentially really good. Ultimately, though, you will still have the same weakness that evasion-oriented characters do have, and that is damage over time effects. Wind Ward will not, Wind Ward will provide a limited degree of protection against them. You won't be losing your Gale Force when you first start taking damage over time. So if it's a ground-based area of effect skill that you're standing in, Wind Ward will provide excellent protection against that. But if it's a hit that then inflicts a damage over time effect as well, then you will be very squishy with Wind Ward. So it's good, it's bad in the same thing. I reckon it's worth considering, but it's not one of the most powerful defensive ascendancy nodes in the game or anything like it. So now let's look at the other two niche nodes. Our focal point is the mark-oriented effect. So 75% increased effect of your marks is pretty significant. Do recall that in 3.12, all of the mark skills were overhauled completely, and they can now only apply to one enemy at a time. So 25% less damage taken from other enemies near your marked enemy. Again, we have this ambiguous word near. We don't know what this means. There's no consistency. It is possible that this will be absolutely incredible if near is a large enough radius. I don't think it will be. I think that this will be a nice little minor bonus only. However, what you should consider is for double boss fights, inflicting 25% less damage taken on one of them may be a very powerful defensive layer. You do still have to cast your marks though, so I expect this will be niche. It won't be used widely. Lastly, marks you inflict are not removed from dying enemies. This gives you quite a bit of control and is actually something that's better than it sounds. You can inflict a mark on an enemy, then in order to gain benefit of the 25% less damage taken from other enemies near it, then kill one. So you could do that on a trash mob, inflict a mark on a trash mob, kill that trash mob, and then just leave the boss near it. You need to have a lot of control over boss movement for this to work though, and that again comes down to Decoy Totem, much like we're talking about with respect to Farshot. Lastly, we have Rupturing. And Rupturing, again, this is the only bleed support on this tree, but this is going to be really solid on builds that are primarily using the bow attack puncture. Critical strikes which inflict bleeding also inflict rupture. So ruptured targets take 25% more damage from bleeding, and bleeding on them expires 25% more quickly for 3 seconds. Up to 3 ruptures can affect a target. So this feels like something that's going to be at its best when you are roughly critically striking once per second. This is a really difficult sort of balance to hit. It's probably going to require you to find some source of power charges on your build. And then you're going to be trying to pepper the target full of arrows, and then and then once you're doing that, you will then be benefiting from the fact that they're occasionally getting ruptured in there, but not getting ruptured all the time. It's going to be tricky to see how this works. You will want to consider the use of the Keystone Perfect Agony on such a build, but I'm not guaranteeing that it will necessarily be the right call. So the other thing that needs to be said is that unfortunately Fast Shot is providing bonuses to hit damage. It's not providing ailment damage bonuses, so it doesn't look like Fast Shot and Rupturing have any real synergy at all. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Deadeye Ascendancy. How would I build this? Essentially, I think any Deadeye build from previous versions of the game is probably still going to be viable, but will need to be changed a little bit. You will definitely want to be using no support gems that are dedicated to damage projection, just ones that are dedicated to dealing damage. And you will need to be very careful with how you stay alive when enemies force you into close range. Ideally, though, I think you want to be using Decoy Totem on every Deadeye in conjunction with Fast Shot. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away though. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have a good one.